Welcome back, beautiful tri state area. You're listening to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up next in our Trailblazer segment, brought to you by Your Home TV and our friends over at Kathy Ireland Worldwide, we're featuring the awesome Lizzy Savetsky. She's a digital influencer and outspoken activist for Israel and the Jewish people. She travels across the nation and internationally to speak for numerous nonprofit organizations and philanthropic movements to support her people and her homeland. She's gained a devoted following of over 350,000 followers on Instagram alone, where she shares educational videos, advocacy, and glimpses into her life as a mom of three in New York City. She's been called a digital warrior, fighting anti Semitism on the front lines of social media. Today, she joins me to chat why the Israel-Hamas war was inevitable or not, where the Israeli community stands from here, and her opinion on if Joe Biden is handling the situation properly. Now, of around 240 people taken captive on October 7th, almost half were released by Hamas during a brief truce in November. And Hamas's war with Israel is in some ways our third world war, some would say. Israel and her people, they're being fought on both physical battlefields and digital ones with huge global reach and implications. In today's tidy, wired world, which we all are, it's possible that the war over the Gaza Strip, which is twice the size of Washington, D.C., could actually decide the next president of America. And among the most ignorant and vile things that have been said about this Gaza war is that Hamas had no choice, that its wars with Israel culminating on October 7th with a murderous rampage, the kidnappings of Israelis as young as 10 months old and as old as 86, and the rape of Israeli women could somehow be excused. Well, my heart hurts for the victims, as does Lizzy's and so many others. As Israel's vigil for its hostages in Gaza moves into a fourth month, a sense that time is passing while world attention shifts elsewhere has deepened the anguish felt by their families as hope has faded for a deal to secure their release. Welcoming now to the show to get her thoughts is the amazing Lizzy Savetsky. Welcome to the show, superstar.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so honored that you're doing this segment and have brought me here to talk about it.
Well, you are the perfect person, and how fitting it is for you to talk about this. So, can you share with us? I'm going to start from the beginning, your journey as a digital influencer and how you became an outspoken activist for Israel and the Jewish people. And of course, I'd love to know what motivated you to use your platform to advocate for Israel and address these issues like anti-Semitism.
So I had always been an outspoken Jewish person. It was never something that I hid from the world, but it also wasn't my focus with my content. I was a fashion and accessories blogger, sometimes, sharing bits and pieces of my life as a mom in New York City. And I would share things like the Jewish holidays or what I was cooking for Shabbat dinner, but I was never really looking at my content as advocacy. And everything really changed for me in the spring of 2021 during the conflict in Gaza, which at the time we were considering a war, but it's referred to now as a conflict. And I see now, since October 7th, how much more severe, things have gotten. It was really one particular day when I made a decision to wrap myself in the Israeli flag and make a post on Instagram about why I stand with Israel. And the reason I did this was because a friend of mine who lived in Israel and served in the IDF texted me and she said, Lizzy, we are being pummeled on social media and in the media by people with huge platforms, and we really need your voice. And I just said, well, what am I supposed to say? And she said, it will come to you. This is the moment that you were made for. And I suddenly felt this huge weight of responsibility. Like I had to step up to the plate because really so few were, and nobody in my industry was. So I did this post and immediately knew that there would be no turning back. And it got really dark for me for a while because I lost a ton of followers. I was getting death threats every single day. I lost some friends, and I lost jobs. I ultimately got dropped by my management company at the time. And I realized I had two choices. I could either just act like this never happened and go back to regularly scheduled programming, or I was going to have to fully lean into it and commit my life and career to this. And that's what I decided to do.
Now, it's interesting because the weekly demonstrations attract crowds in the thousands, but developments like the presumed assassination in Lebanon just recently of Saleh al-Aruri, the deputy leader of Hamas, and political rows about the future of Gaza after the war have left all these families feeling increasingly left behind. That compounded with the death toll among Palestinians climbing now to what clear near 25,000, the world attention has increasingly shifted to the victims of the bombardment and away from the hostages and the 1,200 Israelis and foreigners killed by Hamas on the first day of the war. What do you say to this?
Well, first of all, where are you getting this number, 25,000? That number is coming from Hamas. So that's number one. We're talking about a terrorist organization that said within 5 minutes that 500 people had been killed when Shifa Hospitals was hit by a rocket. How did they know within 5 minutes how high the death toll was? It took Israel 5 weeks to count the 1,400 bodies from October 7th. So you're telling me in 5 minutes that they know how many people were killed. And the second thing to keep in mind is that whatever number of Palestinians have been killed, thousands and thousands of those Palestinians are terrorists. These people have been taken out in surgical, targeted attacks. And yes, there have been civilian casualties, which is absolutely heartbreaking. But the only source for blame there is Hamas.
Yes. And Hamas, to your point, Lizzie, is not simply engaged in some pure vanilla anti-colonial struggle against Israel. I mean, only Hamas's useful idiots on U.S. college campuses actually believe that, right? And Hamas is engaged in a raw power struggle with Fatah, the political party, which is at the grassroots of Yasser Arafat. There, for those of you that don't know. Over who will control Gaza and the West Bank, and it's engaged in a power struggle in the region alongside other pro-Muslim Brotherhood parties and regimes like Turkey and Qatar against pro-Western monarchies like Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Kuwait and the UAE and military-led regimes like Egypt. So this is clear as day, but unfortunately, our youth is not educated on this, and it turns into a social media thing and who's repping Bella Hadid and who did Dior drop or didn't drop, and they've missed the point.
They've absolutely missed the point. It's an amazing PR propaganda machine that they have coming out of Hamas. It's absolutely genius. It's this idea that there is the oppressed and there is the oppressor, and the oppressed people are allowed to do whatever they want to their oppressor, even if it means murdering, burning families alive, raping, kidnapping. This is the narrative that is being fed to our youth, and therefore they side with Hamas. And
Yes.
51% of 18 to 24-year-olds who were polled in the Harvard Harris poll said that Hamas's October 7th attack was justified.
Well, I'm gonna hope that Gazans are gonna come to a realizations because they know the truth, right? Fresh polling data that was reported by the AFP indicated that on the eve of October 7th, many Gazans were hostile to Hamas ahead of the group's brutal attack on Israel, with some describing its rule as a second occupation. So I think things are going to shift right now, which brings me to my next question. Was the Israel-Hamas war inevitable, and do you believe that Israel had a choice? And could you elaborate on your perspective and why you believe this to be the case?
I think it's really hard because Israel is a nation that values life, not just the lives of their own people, but the lives of every single human being. And so when you're a nation like that and you're up against a terrorist run group who does not value the life of anyone, not even the life of their own, It's a very hard battle to fight. It's not a fair fight. So I think that it was, I mean, I do think that this was destined to happen. There was no way that Hamas was going to stay in power and not actualize on their promises. It says in the Hamas charter that they are going to kill every single Jew. It
Well,
says it right there in black and white.
yeah, you're right.
They're going to annihilate the state of Israel.
Let's go to videotape. In September of 2005, Ariel Sharon completed a unilateral withdrawal of all Israeli forces and settlements from Gaza, which Israel occupied in the 1967 war. In short order, Hamas began attacking the crossing points between Gaza and Israel to show that even if Israel was gone, the resistance movement wasn't over. And these crossing points were a lifeline for commerce and jobs, and Israel eventually reduced the number of crossings from 6 to 2. Cut to January of 2006, the Palestinians held elections hoping to give the Palestinian Authority legitimacy to run Gaza and the West Bank. There was a debate among Israel, Palestinian, and Bush administration officials over whether Hamas should be allowed to run in the elections because Hamas had rejected the Oslo peace accords with Israel. And had Hamas embraced Oslo and chosen to build its own Dubai, not only would the world have lined up to aid and invest in it, it would have been the most powerful springboard conceivable for a Palestinian state in the West Bank, in the heart of the Palestinian ancestral homeland. Palestinians would have proved to themselves, to Israel, and to the world that they would do what they would do, basically, with their own territory. But Hamas decided instead to make Gaza a springboard for destroying Israel. And to your point, to annihilate every single Jew. And that's what's been at the root since the beginning. They are terrorists.
That's all they care about. They've never cared about building any sort of infrastructure or building any sort of future for their poor civilians who deserve, by the way, to have a beautiful future. All they've ever cared about is indoctrinating their children into hating Jews and teaching their youngins how to kill, how to, they have camps that they train them how to be future terrorists. This is all they've ever cared about. Their only ideal is to kill Jews and to annihilate the state of Israel. That's it.
Yeah, and again, I tell people, spare me the nonsense that this war is all about the innocent colonized oppressed and the evil colonizing oppressors and that Israel alone was responsible for the isolation of Gaza and that the only choice Hamas had for years was to create this underground skyline of tunnels up to 230 feet deep, and that its only choice on October 7th was martyrdom. I mean, Hamas has never wavered from being more interested in destroying the Jewish state than in building a Palestinian state, because that goal of annihilating Israel is what has enabled Hamas to justify its hold on power indefinitely, even though Gaza has known only economic misery since Hamas seized control, right?
Which is so crazy, and that's exactly what pokes so many holes in that argument, is that they have been given so much money from nations all around the world, and their leaders are living these lavish lives while the innocent, or maybe not innocent, civilians of Gaza are suffering and living in poverty. So if they are living in misery, if they are impoverished, they should be blaming their leaders because their leaders are living large.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, I'm interested to hear your perspective on where do you believe the Israeli community stands now and what are the key challenges moving forward?
Going into October 7th, the population in Israel had never been more politically divided. It was a very rough time period for the Israelis. But since October 7th, they have all come together. I mean, 300,000 reservists stepped up, ran towards the war to do whatever they could for their country. They really put their political differences aside because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the survival of our people in our homeland. So, I think that is priority one. I know that there are a lot of differences of opinions surrounding the current political leadership in Israel. But I, as a Jewish activist who lives in America, I love Israel, but I'm not Israeli. I make it a very strict point that I don't get involved in the inner workings of Israel's politics because I can't pretend to know what it's like to be living in Israel right now since October 7th to feel that I am under attack in the way that they are. And, I can't put myself in their shoes to imagine how resentful or angry I may feel towards my leadership. And so while I am, as an outsider, able to see good points and bad points, when you're up close and personal with it, and it is your leadership, it's just it's a different level of impact.
Bringing me full circle to Joe Biden's handling of the situation. What's your opinion on how Joe Biden is handling the situation in the aftermath of the Israel-Hamas conflict, let's call it?
Well, okay. So I'm going to start really positive. I'm really happy that we had Joe Biden and not, Barack Obama in office, because Joe Biden, I do believe, and some of your listeners may vehemently disagree with me on this, but I believe that Joe Biden is pro-Israel in his heart. I think it's a generational thing. Maybe it's nice that he's elderly because his generation were big supporters of Israel. It was not a controversial subject the way that it is in this day and age. And, they supported Israel with no ifs and or buts, and knew that it was a mutually beneficial relationship between Israel and America, which I believe that Joe still believes it is. There have been issues. The $6 billion given to Iran, his administration, I really don't trust. I was highly offended when Kamala Harris came out with the national strategy to counter Islamophobia, which, by the way, has not risen at all since October 7th. Meanwhile, anti-Semitism has skyrocketed.
Through the roof.
So, I mean, how tone deaf can you be? And so what I fear is if he were to be reelected, I mean, he's not a young guy. And while I may feel safe with his views on Israel, I really don't trust the rest of his administration at all. And I really fear for the next generation of Democrats and the way that things are going, the wokeness and just it's really this. I believe that they're not even doing a good job of hiding their anti-Semitism.
We are almost out of time, and I have one last question for you, my darling. Being a mom of 3 children in New York City, how do you balance your role as an influencer and an activist with your responsibilities as mom?
Oh, balance. That's funny. I'm a Libra. I'm constantly in search of it. I don't really know if balance exists. It has not existed for me since October 7th. I am all in. And, I'm grateful that my family is all in too. My family, we were in Israel on October 7th. We spent the day in a bomb shelter in Jerusalem. And, my kids are impacted for life from that experience that we all shared as a family. And so we've really worked together in our advocacy. It's really become a family business. And it has given my children so much purpose to be able to be involved, whether it's hanging up posters of the hostages, interviewing family members of hostages. My 11-year-old daughter did an amazing interview with a 14-year-old girl whose dad is still currently in Gaza. It's given them purpose in this moment. And so this is really it. This is what I wake up every day thinking about. It's what I go to bed thinking about and, wake up many times throughout the night. This is it for me.
Oh, my dear Lizzy. Well, you are doing an incredible job at getting not only your voice out there, but being a huge supporter to Israel and her people. And I'm so proud to have interviewed you today and gotten your thoughts on the latest developments and bringing it directly from your mouth to our listeners, which I think are going to have a fantastic time listening to you. And they're going to definitely be sharing this because you bring so much insight and depth and transparency. And so thank you so much for coming on and being a trailblazer.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
That was our Trailblazer segment brought to you by Your Home TV and our friends over at Kathy Ireland Worldwide. That was the awesome Lizzy Savetsky. She's a digital influencer, an outspoken activist for Israel and the Jewish people. You could head directly on the gram and check her out at Lizzy Savetsky. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.